Wife accused me of cheating every time I talked to a woman, so we tried therapy, but it didn't help. Then she slept with a guy to make me know how it feels. I, 30M, met my wife, 28F, when I was in college. My major was in business economics and hers was in English, and we met at the house of a mutual friend. We hit things off pretty well, dated for a couple of years, and sometime after we graduated, I proposed to her and she said yes right away. That's the summarized version of our courtship, since I don't think there's anything really noteworthy in there. We've been married for 4 years now. I think I started to notice some changes in my wife. By the way, let me just say that her name is Claudia, as a pseudonym, after we got married. I think about a year after. It started after she walked in on me and a female colleague together at a bar. I know it sounds bad, but it was an entirely innocuous situation. A bunch of us co-workers went out after work for some drinks, which isn't an unusual occurrence, and as people started to leave one by one, it was eventually only me and this colleague left at the bar. Claudia walked in with her friends, and they came to say hi to us. I returned the greeting normally, because it's not like I felt like I was doing something wrong, but it was when Claudia got back home after me that everything hit the fan. When she walked in, she threw her purse down and came stomping towards me. She pointed a finger in my face and started screaming about how she caught me in the act, cheating on her. I tried my best to tell her that wasn't the situation, but she honestly didn't let me get a word out. When she finally calmed down, only after calling me every horrible thing a person can call a cheater, I explained the situation to her, even showing her photos that the group of us had taken earlier that night. I also pointed out to her that I didn't react strangely when she came with her friends because I knew I wasn't doing anything wrong and I had hoped it would be evident. After my explanation, she said okay, seeming to have finally understood, stood there for a few seconds like she wanted to say something, and then she went into the room. This was quite some time ago, but it still irks me to this day that she never apologized after all of that. However, the reason why I'm retelling this whole episode is because that was the point where she seemed to become clingy and overly jealous. I would sense mood shifts if I looked in the direction of a woman or simply answered a few questions for a woman, even if she was just asking for directions. I also noticed that these rules didn't seem to apply to women who were very obviously not a threat. I think a sensible amount of jealousy is healthy because it allows for the enforcement of boundaries, but it's very easy to tell when it's excessive. In her case, it just seemed to become excessive after that episode, which didn't make sense to me because she had no reason to be so wary of me in the presence of other women. Most of the time, I'll know that an interaction with a woman has soured her because I'll notice a shift in her emotions, but it is only some of the time that she actually starts something. It's never a civil discussion as she always gets emotional around the topic, and to say it drives me crazy is an understatement because she'll always cite the smallest thing as the reason she suspects me. For instance, there was a time when she caught me and one of the female neighbors in our apartment building talking in the hallway. We were literally just talking some basic politics, and Claudia walked out of our apartment, saw us in the hallway, and walked back in. As soon as I saw that happen, I knew I'd be in for it. At that very moment, I'll admit that I thought of divorce, because honestly, I knew that I couldn't keep living that way. It was highly draining. The only thing was, I felt like it'd be better for us to approach couples therapy first, at least before I ended things with her. After all, I love her. So, we tried that, and truth be told, it helped, at least in the immediate period. But things took a comedic turn when she felt the therapist was taking my side too often, and then the therapist was the next person who Claudia assumed was trying to sleep with me. I remember laughing out loud the day she expressed that thought. Didn't make the situation better, but I couldn't help it. We eventually switched to a male therapist, and with that, the sessions were at least able to go on much longer, at least until the point where it seemed like the changes were actually sticking in her head. We went several months without an incident, so it finally seemed like there was progress. Well, at least until the point that I'm writing this post about. The last several months have been normal, like how things were between us before the hyper-jealousy even became a thing. However, I think things blew up when Rebecca, the same colleague who was in the bar with me years back, came to the house to hand over some documents when I wasn't there, since I was meant to be working from home the next week. I think my wife recognized her from the first time around, and I don't know whether she had a Winter Soldier moment or whether it was simply because a woman came directly to the house looking for me, but all hell broke loose when I got back home. She started howling at me the moment that I walked through the door, and I was greeted with documents being thrown in my face. She asked me why Rebecca knew where I lived. According to her, before I could even answer, it was because I must have brought her there before to sleep with her. The real answer was simply that I had told her where I lived when she said she wanted to drop the documents off. It didn't help that Rebecca is quite a curvy woman, so it then moved into a rant about how I must like women who are endowed a lot more than she is and I must have been sleeping with them all over town. She even said she was going to get herself tested for STDs because she was entirely convinced that I had cheated on her numerous times. Once she was done raving, I walked into the house, took a few basic things that I would need, and I walked out. I honestly had nothing to say to her, especially not in that state. I also knew that no matter what I had to say, it probably wouldn't enter her head, because when she's in that emotional state, the voice of reason doesn't get to her. I knew it'd be better for me to leave the house entirely, so I did that. I heard her shouting behind me, "Enjoy Rebecca's bed." Now, this happened very recently and I've been sleeping in a hotel since then. The thing is, I am set on divorcing her because I really can't live several more decades of my life, best case scenario, dealing with a woman who thinks that I'm cheating with every other woman in existence. The problem is, I know that the therapy sessions help to some degree, and I'm fighting within myself trying to figure out whether I should try and attend sessions with her again or whether I should just give up. I think this is the decision I need help with, so I'd love it if you could all give me your opinions and thoughts on the situation. Edit. I've seen several comments saying that I've already tried enough and I should just let go of our relationship already. I sort of agree, since I fear that no matter how many therapy sessions we attend together, it might just take one trigger for her to suddenly go back to being an overly jealous woman. I might not divorce her right away, but I've certainly warmed up to the idea more than I ever have, and I think that the next time this happens, I'm done. This isn't any way to live, to be entirely honest, and I'm getting tired of living my life under such tight control. I don't want to live with regrets though, so I'm going to try to give her one more chance and I'll be done if this happens just once more. I'm not very optimistic though, so I'm getting used to the idea of becoming single again. It is what it is. Update 1. Well, here's an update that I wasn't expecting at all and I don't even know how to express how freaking pissed off I am with this new development. So, as I told you all the last time I posted, I was getting more comfortable with the idea of divorce, but I just wanted to give her one more chance to get better. The good thing is that I didn't need to wait too long for it to become evident that she's never going to get better, and she decided to show me in the most obvious way that she could. I realized that there was a problem when we went to a friend's barbecue and I saw her being unusually touchy on someone there. We didn't know the person, but I asked the host, who is my good friend, and he told me that the guy was recently divorced and worked in the construction industry. I was concerned because my wife was never so touchy with anyone but me, so it was obviously very strange behavior to me. This was coming about 2 weeks after the very last episode that I narrated in the previous post. Anyway, I tried my best to keep an eye on her during the barbecue and I refused to make any kind of scene, so it was only when we got home that I spoke to her about it. She didn't seem apologetic about it and I can never forget as she said, "Well, now you know how it feels then." Honestly, that part left me speechless for a bit, because that was basically her admitting that she was rubbing up on that guy intentionally, to make me jealous. Honestly, it was so stupid to me since it wasn't even a sensible comparison. She gets jealous when other women speak to me. I've never thrown myself at them or gotten touchy. It was far from the same thing. She even added, "Are you just jealous because he's a handsome guy? Because he's more fit than you?" At that point, I just walked out, because I was starting to get to the point of anger where I wanted to hit something. She said nothing as I turned and left, and honestly, as I did, I knew for a fact that I was going to be getting in contact with a divorce lawyer. I didn't return to the house until 3 days later. The funny thing is, even if I hadn't been sure enough, she set the decision in stone just a day later. I got a call from my friend who had hosted the barbecue. His name is Bill, and he seemed pretty serious. He said that we should meet, so I agreed to. When I got to him, he told me that his friend, the one who my wife was talking to and I had asked about, called him. According to him, the guy said that he had hooked up with Claudia the day before, which was literally the day after I left the house, and he wanted to know what Bill thought about her since she said she was single. I must have zoned out at that point because I honestly can't remember what was said after then. So, by hooked up, it seemed clear that they had sex, and Claudia presented herself as single to this man? And the worst part is that I might not have found this shit out if the other guy hadn't come to talk to Bill about it. My head was spinning at that point and I didn't know what to think. I didn't even know how to proceed in that immediate moment. Bill could see that I wasn't paying attention though, so he waited for me to come back. He said that he had told the guy that she was married and he seemed genuinely shocked. Apparently, she had given no indication whatsoever that she was a married woman and he told Bill, "Forget I asked and I'll forget about her." Immediately he finished telling me all of this, I went home right away to confront her. I didn't rehearse anything and I was ready to let my pure anger guide the way when I saw her. Because honestly, was there anything rehearsed that can best express how to handle someone who is cheating on you? When I walked back into the house, I wouldn't quite say she was in a good mood, but she was more chatty than she normally would have been after something like that. She still had an obvious attitude, because the first thing she said was, "Didn't expect to see you back already," with a stupid grin on her face. She was clearly trying to rile me up and it worked, because the first thing that I said after that was, "Shut up." I've never been so curt, so she seemed taken aback by that. "You slept with the guy from the barbecue. Don't even think of denying it. You cheated on me, Claudia." She stood there for some seconds before sheepishly saying, and I quote, "Now you know how it feels." It came out almost in a whisper, so I know she must have realized how stupid it sounded. I'm not proud of it, but I chucked one of our ceramic kitchen ornaments at her feet. I was pissed off by that stupid comment, because I've never even come close to cheating on this woman, so for her to see this as my retribution and her getback was crazy to me. I can't remember what I said after this, but I remember I did a lot of cursing, screaming, and explaining. I do remember telling her that she was crazy if she felt like this made any sense. I told her that she had never for once caught me even close to cheating. That she was constantly overreacting to the slightest interactions I've had with women, and that she was delusional if she felt like I had ever shown the slightest signs of unfaithfulness. I pointed it out to her right there that all the things that have triggered her have always been women's basic actions towards me, and never mine towards them. I told her that despite the tens of times she had accused me of cheating, she never had definitive proof of a single one of those. It was all in her head, and I told her she needed help. I think that was the moment when I expressed every single thing that I've ever wanted to scream at her, and when I was done, she said nothing whatsoever. She was just standing there. I asked her if she had anything to say, but she said nothing at all. She just shook her head slightly. I told her to pack a few of her things and leave. Again, she stood there for a little bit before walking to the bedroom. She came out about an hour later with her suitcase packed, and I haven't seen her since then. I definitely don't need any help this time around to figure out what to do next, since I have already gotten in contact with a divorce lawyer, and I really want to make sure that I hurt her in the split, because I've put up with way too fucking much over the years, and I'm so exhausted and annoyed that this is what it had to come to. I'll get back to all of you once the divorce is finalized and I know where I stand. Update 2. I'm super happy to be writing this update right now, and I'm writing it feeling like I've had a massive weight lifted off my shoulders. Honestly, I feel great. So, I wrote a post some time ago about my extremely jealous wife who always assumed that I was cheating on her or interested in other women, and in quick succession, she made the decision to intentionally make me jealous and sleep with that same person. That was the final straw for me, and I got in contact with a divorce lawyer in no time. It didn't take long for the papers to be ready, and I made sure that she was served in her workplace. Just so you know, she works at a publishing company, so I'm sure I might have provided some workplace gossip over there. In fact, I know for a fact that I likely did, because she sent me a really angry text that evening talking about how I had embarrassed her and how she knew I was being vindictive. Anyway, let's fast forward to the part where the divorce proceedings were happening. I messed up big time because I had no evidence whatsoever that she cheated on me. I didn't have a recording of my conversation with my friend Bill, or the affair partner's confession to Bill. I tried to see if Bill could the AP to admit to it somehow, but that wasn't practical. However, it seemed that I was actually able to convince them when I spoke about her jealousy, the fact we had attended couples therapy, and when I honestly recounted the entire story. She tried to tell the same story in a way that favored her from the onset, but it was easy to see right through, thankfully. At the very end of the day, I got a very favorable outcome. I got to keep the house, which was fair since I lived there before she moved in with me. It was determined that there was no need to pay alimony even though I earned more than her, because the difference wasn't substantial enough and the judge didn't want to reward her behavior. We fortunately hadn't had any kids yet either, so that was great. I was glad not to have anything at all tying me to her. I also think I got off easy because I agreed to let her have several pieces of furniture and appliances in the house. I mainly did that because I really didn't want to have a lot of the things that she had chosen left behind. I didn't need daily reminders of her. So that's it, I'm free of her, and as much as it hurts to have spent so many years of my life being hounded as a cheater and to have finally been cheated on, I'm glad to be in a position where I know it will never happen again. Now on to the next story. Story 2. I thought my son was jealous of my new stepson because I took him out to sporting events. But it turns out, my son just wanted to be friends with his stepbrother but was too shy to ask. I 38M have a son and a stepson who are both similarly aged, my son Mark 15M and stepson Luke 14M. Mark was defiantly a mama's boy, and unfortunately his mum/my wife died when he was 8. It's been a huge struggle raising him, especially since he has completely different interests to me, which is completely fine, but makes things difficult. Someone who has been a great figure in his life is my sister/his Aunt May, as she is really into the same interests as Mark and they have a great time whenever she babysits. A few years ago I met my girlfriend Laura 37F, who was a single mom since Luke's dad was never in the picture. Me and Luke actually really hit it off since Laura introduced me to him. He never really had any male role models, since Laura only had sisters, and her dad died when she was a teenager. He's also into a lot of the same stuff I'm into, which is where the conflict started to arise. I've tried a couple of times to take Mark to football matches, but he just doesn't have any interest in it, so May looked after Mark when I'd go to football games a couple of times a year. However, Luke was incredibly excited to go to games with me, as he's never been before but is a big fan. Recently, May spoke to me in private and said that Mark was incredibly jealous of Luke spending time with me alone, and asked that I not go to a Formula 1 event with him next weekend. I asked Mark if he wanted to go, but had no interest in it. They both are really good friends, but Mark felt like I loved Luke more than him, which admittedly broke my heart. Even though he doesn't go to football with me, I still make sure to take him to things that he'd enjoy, such as West End shows, and concerts of his favorite singers. I said to May that although I understand and try to speak to Mark, it would be incredibly unfair to Luke to stop taking him out and to not take him out next week when he's been excited for it for so long. May said that I needed to put my own son first and that I was damaging my relationship with him. Those words have kind of cut deep, and I was wondering, Ida? Comments, Cole_Al, Uda, and I can't believe all the people who are giving you a pass. You are over the moon to have a stepson who shares your interests and have consigned your son to an also ran. There is also an air of toxic masculinity running your whole post with the emphasis on sports and race car driving. It would be incredibly unfair to Luke to stop taking him out. No one suggests you have to stop doing things with Luke, it's not a binary situation. What you need to is give your own son the kind of attention he needs rather than indulging your own desire for a mini-me. Why does Mark have to do all the work here? It's not enough for you to leave it all up to Mark to come up with things to do, it's your job as his father to actively pursue activities he would like. Denigrating his interests is not the way to fix this. You don't have to do things you don't like, what you are supposed to be doing is working on developing some common interest. Mark is 15 and you seem to have just written him off because you now have the son you always wanted. Dude, that is absolutely odd behavior and you need to set a corrective course. Civ mom, oh my god, find things your son likes and go do them. Read about them. Find out how to enjoy them. The point is to spend time with your son doing things he enjoys, not demanding that he enjoy your activities in order to get time and attention from you. Uda. K-roll, Uda. Your son's mother died and now you're emotionally abandoning him because you have discovered a mini-me in your stepson. I feel sorry for both those boys having you as a role model. This is a truly sad post. Nicolexo, I think you need to listen to your sister and start putting your son first. In your own words, you don't match his energy for his interests. Instead of the Formula 1 event with Luke, I suggest spending some one-on-one time with Mark, go out for dinner, or a weekend vacation. If you don't start putting your son first, you're going to have a strained relationship once he hits adulthood. Edit, Uda, but you have the opportunity to redeem yourself now that you know how your son feels. Update, first of all I want to thank everyone who gave comments. I felt some of the comments and messages I received were judgmental and hurtful, but accepted that most people seemed to think I was the asshole in the situation, so rather than defend myself my priority was to make things right with my son Mark. I spoke to him and opened up by telling him how much I loved him and how I wouldn't change anything about him, and that he inherited all of the qualities I loved so much about his mother. He seemed pretty confused when I said that and said he really appreciated it but asked where it was coming from. I told him that I heard that he was getting jealous about the time I was spending with Luke one-on-one, and that I'd hate for him to think or feel that I was abandoning him by spending time with Luke. He then had a bit of an embarrassed look on his face and reassured me that he didn't feel abandoned or jealous of Luke. I then mentioned how Acc said otherwise, and he then visibly cringed. He then told me that he was jealous, but of me rather than Luke. That he thought Luke was incredibly nice to him when they first met and was really excited to have a friend like him since most of his friends through his school and clubs are girls. That he'd like to spend more time hanging out just the two of them, but he's much interested in hanging out with me rather than him. I instantly felt relief about the situation, and asked if he spoke to Luke about hanging out more, and he said that he hasn't as he didn't know what to ask to do or to come across as weird. I asked what they both had in common, and he said they liked similar video games, music and film/TV, so I offered to buy them both tickets to any upcoming film they'd both want to see and that if there are any upcoming concerts or gigs that they'd want to go to, that I'd buy them tickets if that's something they'd like. Mark was really happy at that suggestion, as well as Luke and Laura. Especially Laura because Luke doesn't really have many friends and she was really worried about how he would get on if there was any blending of families. So turns out they were both wanting to be better friends with each other but neither one wanted to express it out of fear of rejection from the other. Comments, Beneficial Knows 5447. Well, sounds like a happy update to me. Have to admit that when I saw the comments and messages in the original that I was really scared I fucked up big time, but over the moon that everything worked out. Beneficial Knows 5447. I get that. But also, do you know what, it was good that you did go to Mark and just check in. And there's nothing wrong with just checking in and making sure he's okay. So once he realized what you were checking in about, like, okay, well I might as well say the real reason, you know what I mean. Okay, well let me check with my son more often. You know what I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.